Hi, it's Menno. Welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, I'm Dutch, I'm gay, and I make videos about the conflict between sex on the one hand and gender on the other. And I'm happy to say that I very much support Team TERF. Go Team TERF! Go Team TERF! I actually started off on Team Trans, but that wasn't a conscious decision as such. I didn't really know what was going on, so I just sort of naively gravitated that way. My ideas about trans at the time, and therefore my empathy, were very much based on misconceptions. I just thought, I'm gay, they're trans, we're all part of LGBT, whatever, so... we are family! Right? Wrong. As I started to educate myself and go, oh, okay, this is what we're talking about, I couldn't help but wonder how many other people are fooled by the same misconceptions. And I say fooled because these misconceptions really skew your ability to see things for what they are. There are three in particular that I was guilty of. I'm not the first, I won't be the last, and if you're guilty of these yourself, don't feel bad about it. You know, in the words of Alanis, and better late than never. These 3 points can also be quite useful when you're talking to somebody who's new to this, because they're quite innocent and relatable, and will help others to start thinking about, well, what is trans anyway? And do I know enough about this to say, yes, I support this? Before I reveal them, please consider supporting me either via Patreon or via PayPal so I can continue making these videos. You can use PayPal for one-off donations and Patreon for monthly donations. Links are in the video description below, and thank you so much to everyone who is already supporting me this way. I know times aren't easy. I appreciate it very, very much. Okay, here they are, the 3 things I got wrong about trans. Misconception 1. I thought trans was about having gender dysphoria. Transphobe. Misconception 2. I thought trans was about transitioning. So transphobic. Misconception 3. I thought trans was just about people wanting to live their lives. We'll have a look at these one by one in separate videos, so this is going to be a series of 3, although I might add some more in the future. Hopefully, by addressing these misconceptions, we'll get a much richer, fuller understanding of what trans means today, how this is reflected in laws and policies, and how that compromises the rights of others. It might feel a bit like going down a rabbit hole and ending up in a place where nothing makes sense, but I'll try to keep it as clear and as tight as I can. And who better to help us navigate rabbit holes than a rabbit? I love a good rabbit hole, I do. Oh, so he'll be popping up every now and then to point out various other rabbit holes that you can explore outside of this video, should you be so inclined. And if you have the time, talking about time, I'm late, gotta dash. Then we better get on with it. Let's go. Let's talk about trans, baby. Let's talk about what it means. Let's talk about all the questions and the answers that we need. Let's talk about trans. Let's talk about trans. No debate is over. Let's talk about trans. Let's talk about... It's time to spill the tea. Misconception number 1. Trans people have gender dysphoria. This is one of the most widely held misconceptions, and it's not surprising because gender dysphoria, previously known as gender identity disorder, has dominated trans narratives for decades. Now, I don't think gender dysphoria is a particularly useful term. I think what it's meant to describe refers more to a series of symptoms and not the thing itself. It refers to a person being pretty stressed out about being sexed, male or female. They get so triggered by their own biology that they go, "It sucks to be me! No, it sucks to be me! It sucks to be me!" and try to escape it. This is where talk of being trapped in the wrong body comes in.
The male transsexual feels that he is emotionally a female and is physically trapped in a male body.
This is very much what talk of trans has been centered around for at least the last 50 years. Here's a clip from 2009.
Now, you've said that you knew right from the word go that you were trapped in the wrong body.
Yes, I knew I was it's what you call a woman trapped in a boy's body. You feel as if you can't live with the body you're in.
2011.
The most important thing for the patients is that they're living in the wrong body with anatomy that they abhor. They can't stand looking at themselves.
2013.
I have felt for a very long time now that I was a girl trapped inside of a boy's body.
2015.
My body didn't belong to me.
And one from 2020.
When I was younger, I was born in the wrong body, which means that I am transgender.
So you'd be forgiven for thinking that gender dysphoria is at the heart of being trans. Just don't say it, because then they might call you
transphobic.
In fact, they'd have a special word for you. But we'll get to that when we deal with misconception number 2. But first, let's hear a bit more about what it can feel like to have gender dysphoria.
It's not always over like the big things, like voices or genitals or things like that. It can be over quite obscure little things that can take you by surprise. Stuff like how you pee, the appearance of your hands, your hairline, body hair or lack of body hair, eyebrows, jawline, height. The list is pretty much endless. There is nothing too obscure, too strange or too small to feel dysphoric over.
And this is how dysphoria can take over your life. But it's different for everyone in terms of what parts of the body the dysphoria focuses on and how intense it is.
It's important to recognize that not all transgender people experience gender dysphoria the same amount.
Dysphoria can manifest itself in many different ways for many different people.
It can also shift from one part of the body to another. Here's Jake, who found that out the hard way, having just had both breasts amputated.
So ever since surgery, my brain has been fixated on how skinny my arms are and how much I hate that. How chubby my stomach is, I can't stand it. My inability to grow a mustache just causes me so much discomfort. But the biggest part of my refocused dysphoria is bottom dysphoria.
Bottom dysphoria,
Nothing to do with your bum.
refers to being, well, freaked out by the fact that you have the genitals that you do. Oh, is that the time? Gotta dash. In Jake's case, following the amputation of both breasts, her vulva and her vagina became more acute reminders of the fact that she's female.
This is how you remind me of what I really am.
Michelle knows a thing or two about that too.
No matter what you do, no matter what you wear, no matter how you sound, it's screaming out at you. You know that little package between your legs, that most male iconic thing there could be, dangling down there between your legs? You know, this, of all the things you try and do to be a woman, every time you get undressed, it screams at you, that you're still a man.
Okay, so this is what I always thought of as trans. Someone has gender dysphoria and they take medical steps to address it. But this is very much the idea of the old school transsexual. But things have moved on quite a bit. Even the word transsexual is now considered to be outdated.
Every time you say the word transsexual, I feel like it's 1978.
Today, there are many more ways to be trans. Gender dysphoria doesn't even have to come into it.
Hi there, my name's Vera. I'm trans. I don't have dysphoria.
I don't actually think you need dysphoria to be trans.
I definitely 100% feel like you do not need dysphoria to be trans.
I don't think we can say that dysphoria is a qualifier for being trans. You do not need to have dysphoria for being trans.
That's quite a shift, isn't it? In fact, it shifted so far that even assuming that gender dysphoria is an inherent part of being trans is considered to be
transphobic.
That blew my mind. But not everyone within the trans community is down with the meaning of trans having transitioned this way. Some feel it kind of takes the piss.
It's a bit of an insult to people who do experience dysphoria to just be told that, like, that's not a prerequisite to being trans. I'm sorry, every trans person I've ever talked to has experienced it to some level, and the plight is real.
I can't help but feel a sense of, you know, this person and people like them appropriating what it means to be a transsexual.
I feel like it's 1978.
It completely undermines the tragic transgender circumstance of having one's body be in conflict with one's sense of self.
It does, doesn't it? Turns trans right on its head. And if it isn't necessarily about gender dysphoria, then what else could it be about? And what does that mean for how we view trans overall? Well, there's one thing I've come across on my journey of education, which I think explains a lot. And it's almost the opposite of dysphoria, because it's not about pain and wanting to escape it, but about pleasure and how to achieve it.
Your body is a source of endless joy, endless delight.
I'm talking about erotic desire. Wanting to become the opposite sex because you get off on it. Now, we've known about transvestites for years and how for some, cross-dressing can be a paraphilia, meaning it's about sexual arousal. A good example is Grayson Perry, who openly admits that he gets turned on by wearing women's clothes.
Risk is a big aphrodisiac, you know, and I mean, the first time I went out in my mum's clothes was very, very exciting, and I became addicted to that.
And how it's all bound up, in his case, in eroticism, fetish sex, and sadomasochism. Men getting turned on by wearing women's clothes is something that's been researched since at least the early 20th century.
In 1910, Magnus Hirschfeld published The Transvestites, an investigation into the erotic impulse of disguise.
Can you say that in German?
Look, I'm really pressed for time.
Please!
Die Travestiten, eine Untersuchung über den erotischen Verkleidungstrieb. Ha!
Thank you.
Also, in the 1920s, Havelock Ellis coined the term Eonism to refer to people who cross-dressed and engaged in opposite-sex behavior for sexual arousal.
Oh. Medical transitioning can be a way to take this up a notch and going beyond wearing clothes to modifying the body itself. There's a word for men who do this, and if you're a regular viewer of this channel or others like it, you probably know what that word is. So feel free to join in with me and say it out loud. Lorna, I'm counting on you. Okay, here we go. A 1, a 2, a 3. Autogynephilia. Auto meaning self, gyna meaning woman, and philia meaning love. The term was coined by sexologist Ray Blanchard in 1989. It refers to a man who gets sexually aroused at the thought of himself as a woman. But he wasn't the first to think of a name for this phenomenon.
Automonosexuals was coined in 1918, again by Magnus Hirschfeld. He was on a roll, wasn't he? It was to denote men who were attracted by the woman inside them.
A more recent term I found is cross-dreaming, which was coined by Jack Mollet because he found Blanchard's autogynephilia too stigmatizing. For a woman who gets turned on by the thought of herself as a man, the term is autoandrophilia, which I think came about in response to Blanchard's work. It's not part of his work itself. The idea that there might be a sexual element to forming a trans identity is very controversial. And it's easy to see why. If we buy into the ethereal narrative of these poor, gendered souls that by some cruel trick of nature, she's such a turf, became trapped in the wrong bodies, then that evokes empathy.
Poor unfortunate souls in pain, in need.
But if we're faced with the much more confrontational and darker side of sex, kink and fetish,
Now my fantasy is to be the sexiest woman on earth.
we're much more likely to go, and if sex can be a driver behind transness, then that also calls into question the idea that trans is innate. But more on that later. Now, some say that for them, it's not about sexual stuff at all.
There's no pleasure in being trans. I don't get a kick out of it, a buzz.
You know, some men dress up as women and get sexual pleasure from it. It's never been like that for me. And I've always felt that I should wear women's clothes because I've always felt I was a woman.
But for others, it is.
I first cross-dressed when a woman I was seeing asked if she could dress me up in her clothes and do my makeup. Throughout my 20s, I was on and off in relationships where there was this feminization dynamic. What I liked about it was the way that dressing like a woman changed the way partners interacted with my body, how they would kind of treat me like a woman. At the same time, I realized that I would have to transition to have any hope of a genuinely fulfilling sex life. It's about me wanting my sexual encounters to occur from the standpoint of a female body, or, at least as close as I can get.
He's imagining how well he'll fit within your skin.
Sounds quite different, doesn't it? Blanchard's specific theory of autogynephilia has come in for quite a bit of criticism. Julia Serrano is a trans activist who published a paper slating it in 2010 and again in 2020. But this doesn't mean Serrano rejects the idea that there may be an element of sexual arousal or gratification. Serrano rejects the way it was framed. In fact, Serrano's 2020 paper goes on to offer an alternative model of male or female embodiment fantasies. What do Serrano's own embodiment fantasies reveal? While I never really believed the cliché about women being good for only one thing, I found that sentiment kept creeping into my fantasies. I would imagine myself being sold into sex slavery and having strange men take advantage of me. It's called forced feminization.
There was this feminization dynamic.
And it's not really about sex. It is about turning the humiliation you feel into pleasure, transforming the loss of male privilege into the best fuck ever. Turning the degradation of women and the sexual violence they're being subjected to into a fetish, unfortunately, seems to be a common theme among men who identify as women. But that's a whole other rabbit hole. If you want to look it up, check out forced feminization, bimbofication, and sissification. Just don't do it while you're at work, okay? And don't spend too much time on it. Talking about time, oh my god, I gotta go, see ya! In contrast to Serrano, Andrea Long Chu, another man with magical lady feels, seems to be very much embracing the idea of autogynephilia. In fact, he glorifies it. Autogynephilia describes not an obscure paraphilic affliction, but rather the basic structure of all human sexuality. So all men and women basically want to be female. And the gateway to being female is getting fucked. Excuse me? Getting fucked makes you female, because fucked is what a female is. Stop right now. Thank you very much. You can see that Long Chu and Serrano have a few things in common in how they view women and womanhood. As controversial as autogynephilia may be, there are some who openly admit to being autogynephiles or AGPs, like Anne Lawrence, who, after years of research, published a book about it in 2012, collating the stories of 249 other AGPs. Interestingly, it's called Men Trapped in Men's Bodies, which I think reveals a lot more than the idea of a woman trapped in a man's body. In the UK, Debbie Hayton is very open about it. And here's one talking about it.
I am a 33-year-old automonosexual autogynephiliac. I want to be a trans woman. I want to be my concept of a woman, so I'm transitioning to get there. When I do satiate myself in that way, it's just the idea of being a woman, like the HRT. I am transforming into this, and it's just that idea that stimulates me.
So I think we'd be quite naive to dismiss or discount the element of sex and the role it can play in some men declaring themselves to be trans. It also calls into question that people are born trans. That's certainly not how it started for Andrea. Sissy porn did make me trans. And just in case you're wondering what sissy porn is...
Oh god. Sissy porn is a subgenre where a male is subjected to the humiliation of being degraded as if he was a woman.
Can you spot the recurring theme here?
It consists of flashing images, text, and a voiceover that tells the male viewer that he's worthless, that he's got a tiny dick, that he needs to wear panties and act girly, and even take feminizing hormones.
Andrea is not the only one to express these sentiments. Back in 2014, one guy who was 95% convinced that he was a trans woman asked on Reddit, "Did sissy porn make me trans, or was I trans all along?" Because for him, it all started with sissy porn, just like with Andrea. He became obsessed with it, started wearing panties, then started imagining himself as a girl when he masturbated and realized that nothing got him off in the same way. So again, nothing to do with being
born in the wrong body.
And it's an interesting question. Was porn simply the gateway for him to discover his transness, or was it the cause of it? Guys have been wrestling with this trans origins question for years. Here's a post from 2003. This is actually a letter that somebody wrote into Anne Lawrence.
Healthy trans girl or sexual deviant? She can't tell.
And a post from 2016.
I'm so sick of trans vloggers telling me how they always be knowing they was transgender. For most of us, we didn't know shit, except it turned us on to dress like girls. This means that we always got this looming fear that maybe the trans shit we develop later on is some kind of mutant offshoot of the turn on.
So there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing going on here. Which came first? Serrano seems to go with trans first, sexualization second. In his book Whipping Girl, he writes about how an impressionable transgender teen, under the right circumstances, will learn how to turn her gender identity into a fetish. But Andrea Longchu, in his essay Did Sissy Porn Make Me Trans?, argues the opposite, and I quote, "Turning people trans is exactly what sissy porn says it does. And that's because the act of watching it is designed to feminize the viewer in real life and therefore create more sissies. That's the very purpose of sissy porn." I do kind of miss the days where I didn't know about any of these things.
Oh, how will I ever be simple again?
The reason I've pointed these things out is to show that trans comes in many different and often contradictory shades. Dysphoria, no dysphoria, born this way, porn this way. How are you supposed to know which one is the real trans and which one isn't? And what do you base that on? Apparently, we're not even supposed to ask that question.
I'm not going to sit there and tell somebody you're not trans because you said this about yourself. Because guess what? I don't have the right to do that.
There is no right or wrong way to be trans. That is true. And it's also not anybody's right to be able to dictate if somebody else is trans enough or not.
Fine. In that case, we'll accept everyone as truly trans, even the ones who came at it through porn or jerking off in their sister's knickers like Mia Byrne.
Mia wrote a poem about masturbating in his sister's underwear when he was a 12-year-old. It's called Garments, and it was published in an online magazine called Egg Mode in 2015. Egg is a term that refers to a person who doesn't realize they're trans yet. They haven't hatched, so to speak. The online magazine is full of stories about being trans and porn consumption. On the cover it says, "For the sissies in the back row."
Lovely. Now forgive me for wondering how prevalent this sexual stuff is.
In an article called Gender Dysphoria is Not One Thing, Michael Bailey and Ray Blanchard write that in recent years, autogynephilia accounts for 75% of cases of male to female transsexuals.
And I also wonder how it differs between male and female cross-dreamers. In some cases, of course, it's pretty obvious. Like when Eddie Izzard says that he's had boob envy ever since he was a teen. When Kyla Lemieux, that Canadian teacher, shows up to class in a miniskirt with size Z prosthetic breasts. Or when Chloe, reportedly a woman, gets her penis out and masturbates in public. Eddie, Kayla, Chloe, do you see three poor, vulnerable, marginalized women who just need some kindness and compassion? Well, I don't. I see three fetishistic men on a sexualized ego trip living out their sexual fantasies in public. That is also trans. Okay, so I've focused a lot on the men. I haven't really gone down the rabbit hole of the female cross-dreamers or the autoandrophiliacs yet. And to be honest, I just want a cup of tea now. But Mr. Rabbit can point you in the right direction should you want to know more about that.
Yes, by all means, check out Boy Love and Yaoi. These are subgenres of anime, mainly produced by females, for females. The stories focus on pretty gay boys falling in love, having sex, and again, it gets quite explicit, so don't check it out at work. Also, check out Autohomoerotic Gender Dysphoria. This is where straight women want to become gay men. Oh, the fun never ends in Woo Woo Wonderland.
So, to sum up, so far, this is what I got wrong about trans. I thought it was about having something called gender dysphoria. I now realize you can be perfectly trans without, suggesting that a person with gender dysphoria is somehow more trans than someone without is
transphobic.
Having listened to trans people, I now realize that for some it's very much a sexual thing and by their own admission can be related to watching porn. Another thing I've learned is that the objectification and the degradation of women appears to be a common theme. But apparently there's no right or wrong way to be trans and we don't have the right to question it. Okay, so it's not as simple as I thought it was.
And look at all the new things we've learned.
Bottom dysphoria, paraphilia, eonism, autogynephilia, automonosexuals, cross-streaming, feminization dynamic, embodiment fantasies, forced feminization, bimbofication, sissification, sissy porn, egg, boy love, yaoi, auto-homoerotic gender dysphoria.
I mean, you want rabbit holes? You get rabbit holes.
All of this raises more questions for me. And when I read a story about a guy getting his cock out in the street to masturbate, but calling himself a woman, I kind of wonder, but wait a minute, is the whole point of transitioning that you get rid of it?
Know that little package between your legs, that most male iconic thing there could be?
Which brings us to misconception number 2. But I'll deal with that in a separate video because I think this is probably more than enough for one video. So thank you very much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe and I shall see you in the next one.
Can I go now?
Off you go.
Ciao.
Woo woo.
Hello, thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, entertaining or thought-provoking, please consider supporting me via Patreon or via PayPal so I can continue making these videos. And thank you so much to those of you who already support me that way. It makes a huge difference. Massive big thank you to my big spenders. Help Her Open, Mama Turf and the Turventines, The Lovely Mary, Me Julie, Julia, Lindy Lou from Down Under, and Esther. Thank you.